represent the seller, and the sellers are.
It's 8 o'clock. Let's go ahead and start. Wherever you are, I hope it's awesome. Hope yesterday was great. Hope tomorrow's even better. We're going to talk about how to win today. We're talking about the NAR settlement. And what I want to, and Mark Violette's here. He's an attorney in Florida. If you're not here in Florida, just
everything we talk about has to be based on Florida law.
With the assumption that other states are pretty similar, if not, it's the same. They're at least in the same ballpark, I would think. Check your local attorney. So I want to look at this NAR thing in three ways. From a listing agent, which is what I operate in my world mostly, is what do I do with our active listings, our current inventory? I think we have 54 listings of some various amount of age attached to them. So I want to talk about what we do with that. Then I want to talk about what do you do with new listings that you're taking. And then the third part I want to talk about is the buyer broker agreement. And we can go off in all subsets that we want to on that. Before we started this today, we were talking about a couple things. Do we want to go on that, or is that?
No, let's just go down.
Let's start with what we want. Okay, so what I want to do here is start out with I have active listings. I'm a realtor. What do I have to do, Mark, with my freaking active listings?
So the first thing you want to do is you want to check what your existing exclusive listing agreement says. Somewhere around end of March, beginning of April, the Florida Association of Realtors revised the exclusive listing agreement to remove the language that talks about putting the compensation in the MLS. So as a general rule, if you have an older listing, one from say March 2024 or older, you're going to have to go into your MLS, go under menu, find your form simplicity, and find your modification of listing agreement.
So we're going to modify the listing agreement if the listing is March or older.
That's going to be the general rule, yes.
Okay.
Then if you have one, you're not sure, was it March, was it April? Does it have the old language? Does it have the remove language? Look at your exclusive listing agreement. There's going to be, under the compensation section, a box that says, if checked, MLS. So if you have a listing agreement that says anything MLS, let's say you don't use the standard forms and your brokerage has created their own.
Okay. Yep.
Then you're going to want to read your agreement. If it references anything with the MLS and commission, you must use the modification agreement.
And the modification agreement states what?
It's got the disclosures now that it's removed any mention about putting compensation in the MLS. And then it's going to have brokerage commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. So those are the two things that now must occur.
So you're going to modify a current listing by sending them a form or as an email?
No, that is going to have to be signed by the seller.
So this gets signed by the seller. So there's some sort of a form in DocuSign or some form simplicity or somewhere. And it's called a modification to listing agreement?
Modification of exclusive listing agreement. Correct. Okay. I don't know if I have it here, but
okay. If you're got listings that are March or older, 6 months or older.
Correct.
Right? You need to get your seller to sign a document that says everything's negotiable and it's no longer going to be advertised in the MLS. Fair?
Correct.
Okay. That's older. What if it's newer than?
Oh, we got a question.
Question number one.
What's the consequence if you do nothing?
Hold on, Julie. My MLS is making us send an addendum to be signed by every seller.
John, where are you from?
New York, I think.
Which state? So like we talked.
He's in New York.
Okay, let's do the one disclosure. So NAR federal covers the whole United States, basically. Each state will adopt their own implementation of it. So when we talk, we're only talking about Florida. You are going to have to see, he's New York City. So you are going to have to understand the differences. If Florida does it one way, but New York does it one way, or Arizona does it another, you are going to have to learn those nuances on your own.
Okay. So as your broker, just say I heard these guys talking today. They said, at least in Florida or whatever, they have to get something signed if it's March or older and it's a modification. And it's a document that gets signed by the seller.
So anytime you modify, your other agreement says the only way to modify it is to have it signed by both parties
Makes
being
sense.
seller and broker.
Okay. So if you have older than 6 months, if you took a year listing or they extended or whatever, that's a modification.
Yep.
All right, cool. Julie, what were you asking?
Well, so my question is, and I think this is not state specific, maybe it is, but if you do nothing, because, you know, a listing agreement basically says that the seller's going to pay X amount, 6 bananas, stay away from certain words.
We could say compensation.
Yeah. Okay.
They're still owing that 6%. And if you don't modify it, that's due to the listing brokerage. It's just no longer advertised in MLS because we can't put it in MLS.
Does that make sense?
Okay, so there's the legal side of the world. There's the reality side. The legal side says you have an existing agreement that no longer conforms with the NAR settlement, and your broker is subject to disciplinary action, whether it's fine or whether it's you could be sued for breaching the settlement agreement and allow all those lovely personal injury attorneys to come knocking at your brokerage door saying you are not complying with the terms of the settlement agreement. That's the legal side.
Okay.
The reality is you and the seller are the only ones that have these documents. So in reality, how would anybody in the world really know? And what we're likely going to see, and I've said it before, is a pattern. And it's really probably going to come not from the listing side, but from a buyer's side, where one of the rules is the buyer's agent cannot receive any form of compensation that exceeds what's written in the buyer brokerage agreement. Now, as this goes on, people are going to get lazy. They're not going to get the buyer to sign a modified buyer broker agreement when the settlement statement shows, hey, buyer's broker got more than what was in the buyer's broker's agreement. At some point, somebody's going to turn in a brokerage.
They're going to be mad.
They're going to go hire attorneys. They're going to sue. They're going to have a right to discovery. They're going to get all of the buyer signed documents, settlement statement, and realize there's a pattern going on, and that brokerage is then going to be subject to lawsuits again. So the answer is upfront or recently, probably nobody's going to know. The entity required to enforce the settlement agreement is really your local, whoever's in charge of your local MLS, which for this area, it's like ECAR, Emerald Coast Association of Realtors, or PCAR, or BCAR, or any letter with a car after it. So that's who's charged with kind of enforcing it. But the way you really get in trouble is another agent finds out because you're bragging or somebody's bragging. Oh, I heard all these videos.
The settlement statement's going to be the tell.
Yeah, I've heard all these videos. I'm not doing any of that crap. We don't care. And then somebody finds out, somebody turns you in. But I think that's how it would work out.
Yeah. And it will.
Yeah.
It will.
I
It's
agree.
coming.
It'll be a lawsuit for whatever reason.
That's interesting. So let's keep going. So if you have an older than March, you need a modification that gets signed by the seller. We're sending those out. I got a lot of listings. We're sending those out now. It's an email. We have a script that we're using. As you know, the NAR settlement requires certain things now. One of them is a modification to your listing agreement. Now, we're not renegotiating our listing agreement.
No.
Right?
Well, I guess there's an opportunity that could happen.
Well, be ready, because the seller might say, oh, good, because I don't want to pay. Can they get out of it? Is this a change in that?
Well, I think they can, because in order for you to have to follow the rules, the seller's got to sign that modification agreement if it includes the MLS language. And at that point, if the seller says, I'm not signing it, you know your brokerage is not in compliance. So your broker needs to have a policy on what you're going to do with the seller if the seller refuses to sign the modification agreement.
Some will say no. Some will say, yeah, I don't care, whatever, sign it, right?
Right. So I think what normally happens is your seller has a trust in the listing agent, or it's not going to work anyways. So if you feel like you're getting attacked at that moment in time, it's probably a red flag that this relationship's not going to last very long anyways. But put all that aside, it's your job now to explain to the seller, listen, let's pull out the old one. Let's pull out what I'm asking you to sign. Look, the numbers are exactly the same. Only reason I'm doing this is because you probably heard NAR requires two things. I remove language that talks about compensation in the MLS or commission. And I have to give you this disclosure that says brokerage commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. That's why I'm presenting you with this modification.
So make sure you have a conversation ready, a script ready for when they say, yeah, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that.
So just remember, you negotiated with them already once when you had the listing signed, and they agreed to something at that point. And the only difference now is seller in a competitive market, when you have 50 listings in your zip code, you have competition. And so for us to get your property sold, we want to offer compensation.
Yeah.
You know, if you have no,
in my view, it's in their best interest.
Yeah. So it's the same conversation, and then they can decide. And the other thing I would suggest
don't be sitting there going,
yeah. So have it prepared. But the other thing is I would suggest, because I've already had to have these conversations because August 1st was when it went into effect in Arizona, is don't use things like e-cars, blah, blah, blah. Those are realtor lingo. Say there's been a federal ruling or something of that nature that they can, it's a common,
national settlement.
Yeah, national settlement.
We must follow.
Yeah, something like that. Not
or even linking to it. Go read it if you want. You know, Mr. Buyer Seller. Go read it if you want.
But let me ask you this: what's would you call is the customary time frame for a normal listing?
Days on market, you mean, to sell something?
Depends on the speed of the market.
Right.
So for me, I always do a year, and then I have a satisfaction guarantee saying if you're unhappy, give me 2 weeks to fix whatever your problem is, and if you're still unhappy, I'll cancel. But I do a year, so I don't have to keep going back and relisting.
So yeah, so where I was going there was people that do 6 months traditionally, there's only 1 month left. So likely you're not going to have a lot of these listings to deal with that are older than the March anyways. Sure. Yeah. Okay. So on the new ones, right.
So on the new ones, all we're doing is what?
So if you have an existing listing, then all you do is send them a disclosure that all it's going to say is,
it's a form or is this an email?
No, this is a form that Florida Association of Realtors created, and I'm going to assume every local state has it because the bottom line is there were the two changes. Commission can't be an MLS. That was on the old form. And brokerage commissions are not set by state law and are fully negotiable. So that doesn't require modification because you're just disclosing to them.
You're not changing anything.
Correct. So it's a unilateral document that you email, you fax, you carrier pigeon, you hand deliver, however you want to get it to them. They don't need to sign anything. You actually sign at the bottom when it was delivered to the buyer. And if you send an email, I don't know, there's nothing that says whether you have to have proof that it was received. I believe the only standard is that you have delivered it, and then usually it's the responsibility of the seller to keep you updated with addresses, email addresses, contacts, and things like that. So.
And again, if you don't do it, you're at your own risk.
Well, you are at your own risk, and you're putting your whole brokerage at risk.
Right.
Because it's simply a disclosure.
Correct.
Yep. So do it.
Correct.
Do it. Okay. So that takes care of the current listings. You either get a modification, removing the compensation and disclosing, or you get just a simple disclosure saying what's going on, right? Both are forms you can go for. Fair?
Yep. John said New York apparently made them eliminate the buyer's commission on August 5th. So Arizona was August 1st. New York is August 5th. Destin area is August 12th, which was yesterday.
It's coming. Now it's here.
Yep.
Okay. New listings. Let's talk about the new listings, at least here in Florida. All right. In the listing agreement that we use, coming out of Form Simplicity, DocuSign, whatever that comes from. I don't know, whatever. It says how much compensation. We can't say commission anymore or whatever. It's compensation is what we're going with. Bananas.
Right.
Right. I think it is bananas. Destiny, if you have anything to add, start screaming. All right.
I will.
So compensation, like in my world, it's 6%. And this isn't collusion. I'm just saying we charge 6%. That would go where it has gone. It's going to say 6% of the sale price will be earned by the listing agent.
So in a non-technical term, what John just said was the revised exclusive listing agreement section 8 did not change. Okay. So it's what you've always put in there. If you're used to seeing the language, the only thing that changed was non-consequential information. So if you're used to putting in that section, you don't really have to change the way you've been doing things.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's in section 8. If it's not your world, find where it is in your world. I'm sure wherever you are in your listing agreement, there's something that says how much compensation.
Mm-hmm.
And then in ours, a little bit later in section 10, there's A, B, and C. These are the options of how that percent is going to be split. Is that fair to say?
So if you're the listing agent and in section 8, you put 6%, then you drop down to section 10 when you're discussing this with the seller, which has the A, B, and C. The A is the seller directing the listing broker to deal directly with the buyer's broker. You pay out commission.
I'm a seller. I'm paying you 6. You deal with the buyer agent.
Right.
Okay.
We'll say that's how it's always been.
That's the normal way.
Correct.
Traditional way. Okay.
So if you're able to stick with what we call the normal way, then as far as explaining to a seller or filling out the exclusive listing agreement, nothing in your world has changed. However, some seller's going to go, well, wait a second. What is this B and C section? B is where the seller says,
these are checkbox on our form.
Yep.
Okay.
The B is where the seller will then offer commission or compensation directly to the buyer's broker.
Okay. Beyond the 6%?
No. There's a line item in there that says this will come out of the amount set in paragraph 8.
It will never be more than 6% unless there's a modification.
Correct. Okay. Correct. And then, of course, C is the easy one that just says that the seller's no compensation will be offered to buyer's broker. Now, just because a seller checks that box doesn't mean that under negotiations that the seller can't change their mind and agree to pay either the buyer's broker or some sort of compensation or a concession.
For that matter.
So Florida's using the term concession, a concession to the buyer. But that's where it all starts to get tricky.
Now, here, from my point of view, that's always been the same. If I'm doing a deal and we're almost together, but we're not there, we modify our listing from 6 to 5 to 4 to whatever it takes, right? Or the seller gives, the buyer gives, and the agents give. That's the same freaking thing, is it not?
No, it's not, because
wrong answer.
Nope, it's not.
Okay.
And here's why. Because from the buyer's side, maybe from the listing side, because you're already looking at going, the most I'm getting is 6. Whether I get my normal 3 and pay out or it goes down, I don't care. I'm getting my 3 no matter what. Right. And I know if I want to make a deal happen, I can agree to take less than 3. Where it all changes is on the buyer side. Okay. Because in your normal transaction, I'm going to say a buyer, let's say they have $10,000 in the bank. That's the amount that they can bring to closing.
You get 10 grand. That's right. My checkbook.
They're calling up an agent. Their presumption is they don't pay their agent. I don't care what I'm signing. I don't care what the numbers say. I'm not paying the agent because I don't have any money to pay the agent. So I'm going to go in and go, agent, you find me all the 4-bedroom, 3 baths you can find, and let's go look at them. And
I'm paying you, not me paying you.
No, at this point, the buyer doesn't even really contemplate that because they don't know what's out there yet. So they're going to then go to the buyer broker and say, okay, I want to see all these houses. What happens?
4 3s.
Right. So then what happens is buyer broker finds 10 properties.
Yep.
Pick up the phone, call listing agent, 10 properties, because now you can't really track down.
Call every single freaking one.
I'm not working for free.
Yeah.
I want to know what I'm walking into.
You're going to call them anyway because you want to get a showing.
Yeah. And I need to decide as a buyer broker, am I willing to take the risk of maybe not getting paid in the event I call the listing agent and they say, you know what? Seller is willing, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. Okay. Or at this point, I'm sorry, but the seller checked box C, which says he's not, he might, but he's not. Then the buyer agent is forced with, do I just hand the listing now over to the buyer and say, good luck, I wash my hands? Those, I think, are the things that we don't know at this moment in time, how that's going to work out.
What if you don't? What if I don't want to hand over the stuff that isn't paying?
Okay. So there are, in Florida, again, you can go to Florida Realtors with an S.org. .com.org. I forget which one it is.
Okay. So now we're talking buyer broker stuff. Okay.
Because what's going to happen is, there aren't answers to some of these questions. And then there are some answers, or there's some guidance, let's just say. Okay. Joanna Watkins, who is the attorney for the Florida Realtors, has done videos to help you kind of navigate the what if this, what if that. And what she has said was, if that presents itself,
Okay.
you have a couple options.
What are they?
One of them is to call the listing agent and say, listen, I'm not going to show a buyer where the seller's already saying I'm not paying commission, but I'm going to hand the buyer to you. Will you pay me a referral fee? So you may be able to line that up.
All right, pause.
Yep.
Will you pay me a referral fee? Okay, listing agent's getting 3%. All right, with 0 going to buyer side.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to pay what, a 25% or some percent of my 3%?
I have no, it's whatever you feel like doing, because really you're probably going to inherit both sides now.
Yeah, so now I'm doing twice the work.
Right.
So the whole point of the settlement was to protect buyers and sellers.
Wrong. It was to make it hard on realtors.
And the outcome is that there's going to be steering, and there's going to be avoiding, and there's going to be agents not showing properties.
And if you say it's not going to happen, you're just fooling yourself.
So here's what I do. I just group all that. Whenever bad law comes out, which happens, we have what we call unintended consequences. So to sidetrack for 5 seconds, this is because plaintiff attorneys found a way to make a bunch of money and knew that the DOJ would be on their side because the DOJ has never liked this structure. But the Department of Justice doesn't do this on a daily basis and does, I would say, very little due diligence to learn about unintended consequences. So you are correct. There will be steering, there will be unintended consequences. But what I've tried to and I've done a lot of seminars where I'm the teacher, and the crowd loves to pull it into this isn't fair, I don't like it. And the only way I can rein that in is to say, it doesn't matter what you like or don't like. This is now what you've been handed.
Yeah.
So suck it up and figure out how to navigate. And that's kind of what John does with these videos, is to say, we all know it sucks, but here's what happens in the field. So let's not spend too much time worrying about it sucks and what happens when you get presented with this stuff.
No, and I'm not saying it sucks. I'm very much embracing and liking it.
Yeah.
But the reality is you as a buyer's agent, especially, it's so critical to get that buyer broker agreement signed, 3%, because now the buyer is going to negotiate on your behalf. The problem is, as a listing agent, both the listing agent and the buyer's agent, when we can't come together, everyone's going to go to dropping the buyer's agent's commission, because they're going to try to get it to come together, and that's the one that's the easiest one to drop. But if you have a buyer broker agreement in place, now the buyer is going to be pushing to make sure that the seller pays, because otherwise it comes out of their pocket.
Correct.
Okay, so what are we saying here? Lori is saying that I need to wear glasses. Concessions cannot be conditioned upon the selection of or payment to a buyer broker. It is not emphasized, an appropriate designation for compensation to the buyer broker from the seller. You got that?
No.
I don't understand.
I don't either.
Okay, so Lori, if
Can
you
we rephrase that maybe a little bit better? Because we're using concessions, conditions, payments, and compensation all in the same sentence.
So she's saying it can't be a condition to whether or not the buyer broker is being paid. We understand that, but the thing is it has now become a negotiable item. Buyer's compensation, and we can all theorize what is the best way and what is fair and legal, but we also know what's going to happen. And what's going to happen is the buyer and the seller want this to come together. And the easiest thing for everyone to jettison is the buyer's broker's compensation, because it's not a safe thing that's already been negotiated and being offered in and set aside in MLS. It's gone. So that is going to be something that we're going to have to negotiate hard for. And I'm already seeing it happen here in Arizona, because we went, 7/31 is when all the compensation went out of MLS. 8/1 was when we started this brave new world.
Right.
Can you not ask a buyer in initial buyer's consultation prior to getting it signed, do you only want me to show you homes that offer a buyer's concession?
Say that one more time. Sorry, I was looking at something else.
When
Sorry.
you're having that initial buyer's consultation, you know, and you're getting ready to have that agreement signed, can you not ask the buyer, do you only want me to show you homes that are offering a buyer's concession?
So,
Steer me.
right. So again, if you go to Joanna Watkins' video, what she's going to say is if a buyer has said, I want to see, and I just use 4.3 as an example, then you are ethically obligated to find all of the available ones and present those to the buyer. Whether or not you say, I'm willing to work for free, or to say, you do understand I don't work for free. So if a seller is unwilling to pay me a compensation, I'm going to hand you the listing and you are going to have to work directly with the listing agent and the seller on your own. Okay. That's what she's presented as the option.
Let me give you a solution, Destiny. What I would say is, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, thank you. I look forward to helping you, all that stuff, right? I cannot send you anything, all, some, or none. I can send you none, but I won't do anything until we have an agreement that I will be compensated. All right. Now you're going to want to do that in a way that works. Don't start sending them shit is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And if you're going to, you got to send them all the shit. Right. But if you get the buyer broker, you know, I'd love to do it. I'm confident we can help you out. We have the means, the capabilities and all that. But before I do, I need you to sign off that we're going to work together. Then you're covered.
Is it not law? So here in Arizona, I guess I don't know if I'd call it law or ruling. This is where I get stuck on the correct.
It's working with. I don't know what working with means.
But here, I guess it's a MLS. Is it MLS or Arizona Association of Realtors? The first penalty for not having a signed buyer broker agreement is a $500 penalty. The second is $5,000. And the third is you're no longer allowed to use MLS. So there's a penalty that you're going to want to have that buyer broker agreement signed.
Get it signed no matter what. My thing is, don't start sending them some stuff until they sign it.
Ours you can't show. So that the penalty is if you show a property without a written agreement, a buyer, that's when you can be penalized.
So I'll give you a good example. Sunday, I've been stalking this property for over a year now. And I finally called the listing agent and said, all right, I'm ready to go see it. I've seen everything. I've got it. And I show up and he's got a show. What's that?
You didn't call John?
John's a listing agent. So hold on. So he shows up and he's got a showing agreement in his hand. And he goes, I guess you know what this is. And I was like, yes, but I do not have to sign that because you are the listing agent. All you're doing is opening up the door for me and I will go in. And he said, we're all so confused on what the rules are. So don't feel alone, I guess.
Yeah, if you're not 100% sure, if you're 10% sure.
And as a real estate attorney locally, hands-on doing title work, my phone and my emails have been blowing up since. Would you imagine this Thursday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, when everything becomes enforceable, to now go to their offices and help explain these documents? Not like 3 months ago, 4 months ago, or a month ago, but a couple days before this all comes in.
So Mark, a twist on what happened with you is, and I'm curious to hear your answer on this. I had the same thing. So I'm the listing agent. And of course, for people who don't know this, as the listing agent, you represent the seller. So you can have open houses and you can open the door and let people walk through representing the seller.
Without any signing of just only the registration.
Correct.
But however, if you are holding an open house or showing on behalf of the listing agent, but your name is not on the contract, are you considered an agent of the listing agent, so an agent of the seller, or because you're doing it for destination for John, and and she's actually wanting to pick up a buyer? Now, do you need at least a showing agreement for? And you can do a one property showing agreement. And I'm discussing this with people and saying my one property showing agreements are for 30 days. I'm going to show you this one property, and it's not for 24 hours so that you can bring in your buyer's agent later. It's for 30 days for this one property. I'm not your buyer's agent for everything, just for this property. That way they can't have you show the home on a Sunday while their agent is drinking margaritas and eating nachos, and then come the next day and write the offer.
So as of whatever today is, August 13th, the best guidance we have, working with buyer means identifying potential properties for the buyer. So if you're just sitting in an open house, nope. Arrange for a tour of the property. You're sitting at the open house. They came to you. You didn't call them outside and say, hey, let's go view this property together. Perform or facilitate negotiations on behalf of the buyer. If you're just sitting at the open house, and let's say, well, we'll get there in a second, and presenting offers. So if you're just sitting at the table and somebody signs in, from what we've been told, the answer is no there. Now, not working with the buyer means marketing their services or simply talk to the buyer. So a buyer comes in and you say, what brings you here? Well, we want to look at the house. Oh, where are you from? So at this point, there's going to be a magical moment in time where the conversation turns from you meet somebody at the supermarket and they don't even know you're a realtor and you're having a conversation about kids and soccer to, oh, I'm a realtor. Let me show you. Or, oh, you didn't like this house. I have other houses that I want to show you. You'll probably understand where the line is. You've turned from casual conversation into you put your hat on and now you're trying to get them to do something for you where you can earn a commission. So right now, that's the best thing that we have.
Compensation.
Yeah. Sorry. I got to get concession or
compensation. Charge them $100 every time.
Yeah,
even in the case where you're calling around, I do that a lot for an open house to invite people out to the open house. Do you then need that coverage if they actually show up and tour the home and you've invited them?
I would say if you have called them and they show up at that point, in order for you to be entitled to something, you're going to want to, I mean, again, we're going to have this issue of, is it non-compliance or is it compliance? And there's going to be people in the world that say, I'm willing to take the risk. I'm not going to get them to sign it. Or there's going to be people that say, hey, pursuant to the National Settlement Agreement, since I invited you here, I've got to get you to sign this. Now it's going to be awkward. I mean, if the buyer's like, listen, you did invite me here, but I'm not signing anything. I mean, I guess you just write buyer refused to sign and you just don't help them. If they ask you questions, I mean, it's an awkward situation, but that's the best we have right now.
We're going to have to create some script.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at this question. This is going to go on. We're going to have to cut this off and do it again because we actually have work to do. But can we take this question real quick? And Lori, maybe we can answer.
We have a form for this. I want to hear Mark's answer, but we have an answer for that in Arizona.
With the buyer's agent compensation not being published, what keeps the seller's agent from changing the fee? Okay, so in the old days, obviously we had the MLS. If you were a buyer's agent, you would get it under contract, immediately print out the MLS. And if there was a dispute, you would have your piece of paper that showed on the contract date, the MLS printout said X and X. So with this, you are going to have to take the buyer agent compensation agreement. That's going to be submitted now with your offer. And then the seller or the buyer's or the listing broker will have to sign that and send it back to you. That is the only thing that you're going to have in writing that protects whatever you think you're going to get, because nothing is going to be published.
The buyer broker agreements, everything, people.
Correct.
Buyer broker agreement, make sure you get whatever's in there. But
Correct.
we have another form separate. So we have the two main ones that you attach as an addendum to our purchase contract. One is called the seller compensation agreement. And that's where you just put in, here's what the seller's going to give me, and that can be negotiated. But ahead of time, if you speak to a listing agent and tell you the seller is offering 2%, 2.5%, 3%, we have a form called the CABB, the compensation agreement between brokers. If you can get the compensation agreement between brokers ahead of time that says I'm going to get 2.5%, now that can't be, it can be negotiated, but now that's an issue where the listing brokerage is going to have to make up the difference if the seller says no, and you don't have a listing agreement that where the seller says I'm going to pay 6% or whatever that total is. So if you get that agreement before you show the home, then you are guaranteed whatever that number is. Otherwise, everything's negotiable.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I will tell you, it's somewhat tough to listen and try to read comments and then read the question and come up with an answer all at the same time. So
right.
I apologize if I can't clearly answer all these questions, because there's a lot going on that you guys don't see with the questions and the statements, and they're long. So by the time I'm done reading one, I've missed everything that was just said out loud. But
let's do this. Let's circle back.
Maybe next week we talk about like what Lori's question was, and now everybody's going in that direction, is there's a thing called a concession, that a seller can offer a concession that could also include a buyer's agent's payment. But since this is only like a 20 or 30 minute webinar or whatever you want to call this podcast, we don't really have time to get into everything. And I don't want to feel like I'm not answering Lori's questions or somebody else's questions, but we had a predetermined path on what we want to talk about. And we didn't want to get too derailed because some of this, there are fine lines: commission, concessions, compensations, that we just don't have time to address today. So I apologize if we can't get to that. And Lori, I'm not blowing you off or not answering your question. It's just going to take way too much time to explain it, I think.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you guys to send me an email at this address, John Moran at thebeachteam.com. Whatever questions you may have. And then ahead of time.
Right.
So we have some time Mark has time to look at them and consider them and provide a legitimate answer for you. So between now and next Tuesday, if you have a question or a comment even that you want us to comment on, or Mark to at least, send me an email. I'll get them to Mark. He can be ready, and let's go at it that way. It'll make it a lot more better.
Yeah. So next week we can start with like a question and answer session, which in no doubt will lead you to more questions based on the original question, because everything just kind of spiders off.
So let's do that if you would, because we need to shut this down. We can go on. We're already at 36 minutes, which is a
John, real quick, James Rao is teaching a class on Wednesday in the Destin office on all the forms. So if anybody wants to come in and join in on that, it's 11 o'clock. They're going to have lunch provided as well.
Okay. Send me an email if you have questions. We'll address them next week.
We'll be there.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right, guys, let's go to work. All right.
Bye.
Win the day.